Most people think this story is simple. Trade deficits, factory jobs, tariffs, a loud argument about who won and who lost. But if the goal was really to shrink the trade deficit, a lot of U.S. policy makes no sense. If the goal was to bring back socks and microwaves, the strategy looks strangely expensive. So here's the real question. What outcome is the United States actually trying to stop? Not today's trade numbers, not container traffic at ports, but tomorrow's industrial map. This is not a blame story. It's not a morality play. It's a systems story. Because the conflict didn't start when trade volumes grew, it started when efficiency quietly turned into dependence. Part 1. The fear is not cheap goods. Start with what the U.S. clearly tolerates: cheap furniture, cheap toys, cheap clothing, cheap household goods. These categories generate political noise, but they do not generate leverage. A cheap t-shirt does not rewrite the rules of an industry. A cheap toaster does not shape the future of computing. And a cheap sofa does not become a national security asset. This is why the policies don't target low-tech consumer imports. They target choke points, places where scale turns into power. The U.S. didn't panic when factories moved. It panicked when control over critical layers began concentrating elsewhere. Trade wasn't the problem. The structure of trade was. Part 2. Choke points, not containers. In supply chains, not all inputs are equal. Final products are visible, but inputs determine who controls the system. If you assemble smartphones, you have volume. If you control the machines that make the chips inside them, you have leverage. This is why the U.S. strategy shifted. Not a container war, a choke point war. Look at where restrictions actually landed. Semiconductors, not just chips, but EDA software and lithography tools. AI compute, the GPU clusters that define future productivity. Advanced manufacturing equipment, tools with only a handful of global suppliers. Strategic materials, refined outputs where scale compounds quickly. The logic is simple. Once a system controls the bottleneck, its learning curve compounds, its cost advantage hardens, and alternatives become economically unrealistic. At that point, trade stops being commerce. It becomes structural exposure. Part 3. The learning curve. Fear. Manufacturing is not static. Low-end assembly does not stay low-end forever. Repetition creates learning. Learning creates yield improvements. Yield creates cost advantage. Cost advantage attracts more volume. Volume feeds the loop. This is the part that scares policymakers. Because learning curves are asymmetric. They take years to build. They take longer and cost more to unwind. History keeps repeating this pattern. Solar panels, batteries, telecom equipment, what began as cost outsourcing turned into ecosystem dominance. The fear is not today's output. It's tomorrow's irreversibility. Once a country becomes the only place that can do something at scale, everyone else becomes a price taker, not a partner, a customer. Part 4. Why the U.S. chose rules over prices. Tariffs are loud, they raise prices, they leak, they mostly punish consumers. Rules are quieter and more powerful. Export controls don't raise prices. They delay timelines. Investment screening stops factories before they exist. Standards shape markets before products launch. This is why the policy toolbox changed. Export controls, investment reviews, technology standards, allied coordination. The U.S. stopped trying to outcompete on labor costs. It started trying to outrule on access. The objective is not to win today. It's to slow compounding. In technology races, time is leverage. Part 5. Why this is not really about China. Zoom out. The U.S. would react similarly to any system with 4 traits. 1. Large domestic scale. 2. Ability to coordinate industry. 3. Technological ambition. 4. Long-time horizons. Any system with those traits can turn manufacturing into a compounding engine. And compounding engines eventually spill over. Cost advantage becomes ecosystem advantage, which hardens into standard-setting power. China is not unique because it is China. It is unique because it is large enough to change defaults. That's why the pressure focuses on AI compute, semiconductors, advanced tools, strategic materials. Not because of ideology, because defaults determine power. Part 6. What happens if the US does nothing? Let's pause and flip the question. Not morally, structurally. What if the United States did nothing? No export controls, no investment screening, no coordination with allies, no attempts to slow convergence. What would the system do? The short answer is uncomfortable. It would keep doing exactly what markets reward. Scale would concentrate further. Learning curves would compound. Cost advantages would turn into ecosystem advantages. And ecosystem advantages would harden into defaults. At first, this looks benign. Cheaper products, faster rollout, more efficient global supply chains. But over time, something subtle happens. Choice disappears. Not because anyone bans alternatives, but because alternatives stop making economic sense. Once a single system becomes the cheapest place to manufacture, the fastest place to iterate, and the deepest place to learn, everyone else becomes a price taker. You don't negotiate terms, you adapt to them. At that point, trade stops being optional. It becomes dependency. And dependency behaves differently under stress. When geopolitics tighten, when conflicts escalate, when access is restricted, even temporarily, the cost isn't just higher prices. The cost is lost time, lost capability, lost strategic autonomy. Rebuilding these systems isn't like reopening a factory. It means rebuilding entire ecosystems, suppliers, engineers, tacit knowledge, yield curves. That takes years, often decades, and markets don't wait. So from Washington's perspective, doing nothing is not neutrality. It is a bet that no future crisis will ever require leverage, a bet that efficiency will always be more valuable than control, a bet that today's cost savings outweigh tomorrow's constraints. That is a bet most great powers refuse to take. Not because they fear trade, but because they fear irreversibility. This is the part that gets lost in public debate. The policy isn't trying to win today. It's trying to preserve options tomorrow. To slow convergence, to delay compounding, to keep certain layers of the system from locking in permanently. That doesn't make the strategy painless, or cheap, or clean. But from a structural perspective, it makes it legible. This is not a story of villains. Both sides are acting rationally. Both sides feel exposed. When trade becomes a security variable, efficiency stops being the only goal. Resilience rises, redundancy rises, costs rise. That's the new math. So what is the US actually trying to stop? Not trade, not cheap goods, not manufacturing in general. It is trying to stop leverage from compounding irreversibly inside critical layers of the global system. Trade hasn't ended. It has been repriced to include risk. Episode 3 will test the result, not in theory, but in prices, rerouted supply chains, and the everyday complexity tax. Stay curious, stay sharp.